Howdy, Immortalium here. Well, I've talked about light novels a lot, and I've talked about how important it is that Western otakudom embraces this medium, particularly considering how important it is in Japan and to Japanese otaku. But I've never actually done a review of a light novel, but I'm going to rectify that today. Today, I'm reviewing My Girlfriend's a Geek. Now, before I start explaining, my opinions on this series, I better just explain something about it. This isn't entirely fictional. Now, I'm not sure if there are fictional elements to it, or if it's, completely true. But it's based on a blog published by this guy called Pentabu in Japan. His real name isn't Pentabu, obviously. But he's dating a girl called Waiko, which is also a pseudonym. And basically, Waiko is a massive fujoshi. Basically, a fujoshi is it literally translates as rotten girl in Japanese. And what it basically refers to is a girl who is massively into yaoi or boy love, that kind of thing. But she's not just a fujoshi. She's mainly a fujoshi, but she's also an otaku, true and true. She loves anime, she loves manga, she loves visual novels, etc., etc. The author of this, Pentabu, the boyfriend, is not much of an otaku. The only anime he's completely seen is Gundam Seed, and he, watched a bit of Gundam Seed Destiny, but never finished it. He's read a good bit of manga, but he's not massively into manga, so he's kind of struggling with his girlfriend, trying not to get dragged into her way of life. But as time goes on, he's steadily dragged more and more into her ways. What did I think of this light novel series? It's basically a comedy, and on that regard, it does succeed. However, there is a flaw associated with this comedy, particularly this style of comedy, and that is, it is heavily reliant that you be knowledgeable about the stuff that it is referring to. And it isn't a case where it's like a reference gag where it's going, oh, I know Gundam Seed, so ha ha ha. No, it goes deeper than that. So let me just give you an example of a joke. So, basically, Pentabu is going to his girlfriend's house for the first time to meet her family. And he meets her mom, and, he's about to sit down to dinner. She has a pot on, and, he's going, oh, that's a very nice pot. And, she says, yes, it's a Le Creuset. Now, Le Creuset is the main villain, or the masked villain, I should say, to Gundam Seed. And as, she's discussing how great a pot it is, he's thinking in his head, of how, like, Le Creuset's voice going, this pot will serve all your needs. This pot will conquer all. All that stuff. And it is outrageously funny. It is hilarious that I found it to be. But it does require that you know who Le Creuset is. Now, it does explain, who Le Creuset is, that he's the master villain in Gundam Seed, that there's been a succession of master villains. In fact, they give you the line of the master villains in Gundam. But until you actually know who the character is, how he talks, what his personality is like, you're not going to find that funny. And that applies to a lot of stuff in this. It talks about, it tells you what Neon Genesis Evangelion is. It tells you what Ouran High School Host Club is. But until you actually are familiar with that series, you don't need necessarily to have read it, you just need to know of it and who the characters are and all that, then you're not going to find that funny. And so it does require, I would say, a bit more than a basic knowledge of otakudom, of anime and manga and visual novels. It doesn't require, a huge amount of knowledge, but it does require a good bit. So if you're, a recent otaku, and you're only familiar with, some stuff like Naruto and Bleach and One Piece and all that, then, you're going to miss a lot of the jokes in this series. So that is a problem. But beyond that, I just want to point out that it actually does the drama well. Now, I believe that part of that has to do with the fact that it's based on real events, and so these characters, even though we're only getting a certain glimpse of them, do feel very real, very developed, etc., etc. So, for example, there's a flashback kind of bit where Pentabu's talking about how he first met Waiko and why he fell in love with her and why he asked her out, etc., etc. And it is actually very moving, very touching. So from a dramatic element, it works as well. So that will help you, keep going, even if like you're not, into the comedy. But I would recommend that you do have some, knowledge of otaku culture before you leap into this, because you will miss a lot if you're like, okay, I might be stressing that a lot, but I do definitely want to point it out. And that's something that I think Yen Press missed quite a bit. Notice the title is My Girlfriend's a Geek. Now, the original Japanese title is My Girlfriend's a Fujoshi. And I think they should have kept, maybe if not kept that title, because even that term is a bit unfamiliar to Western otaku, it should at the very least have said something like, My Girlfriend's an otaku. Because if you're not going to get most of this if you're simply going in for the fact that it's a geek. And in fact, I think this is a bit of false advertising here. The blurb, it talks about, this blog is a record of battle as dictated by a man with a geek for a girlfriend. There is much geekiness contained, etc., etc. You open up the front, and it has that written in it again, except for it's slightly rewritten. This blog is a record of battle as dictated by a man with a Fujoshi girlfriend. There is much otaku talk within, etc., etc. So, it's slightly changed from the outside, but it is changed. So I think the outside is quite deceptive, that you might think you're buying this simply like for a random girlfriend geek, and yet you find out that you need to know practically all of, well, not all of otaku culture, but a lot to do with it. Now, to do with the glossary, there is actually a glossary in it, and it discusses, things you might not be aware of. For example, what an AT field is, who Amuro is, what Kamaket is, etc., etc. So it does explain a lot of the terms from the book. But as I said, that's no substitute for you actually having, seen or familiarized yourself with that material beforehand. So I do want to stress that out, how important that is. But even so, if you have like a light knowledge of otaku culture, I'd say the jokes you do get and the drama will get you through it. How this is written. Basically, this is, because of the fact that this is originally based on a blog, it's very much written in a blog fashion. So let me just get you an example. So let's say we'll start off with this one. So each chapter is like an entry from a blog. So you have this one here, it says Butler Cafe, and it says what date it was published on, the 29th of the 11th, 2005 at 2:31 a.m. And then it progresses on. So you have the author's, Pentabu's thoughts in his head. Then you have your dialogue between Waiko and him, written down here, kind of like a script. So you have Waiko talking there, then me, then Waiko again. With the occasional gap with his thought here. And that's how it's written. And the font size changes quite dramatically based on, the emphasis. So for example, over here, on this page, it's sticking with the font of the previous page, but it is, for example, saying, why not have butler cafes for them? With refined and old-fashioned decorations, emphasizing the stuff. And sometimes it can get completely massive. A good example of that might be, she didn't even have time to put in a smiley emoticon. So, that's how it's written. And now, every so often, in the first book, you get a little picture drawn, which emphasizes something from the previous story. So, for example, on this thing, it's the discussion of, BL and all that. So, for example, she's repeating something that is written in the, page on there. So, for example, she's saying, okay, meaning you would rather be included in BL, which is some, and a little funny little picture, of his reaction and her there. So that's how that works on that one. That style kind of changed a bit for the second volume. In the second volume, the pictures actually work as a bit of a continuation. So no longer are they optional, no longer are they simply repeating something that happened on the page. it's actually, you know, in place of, you know, a line of dialogue. So, for example, here she's talking about, you know, why shall we go on a school uniform date today? And, you know, he's saying take that off. But that isn't written anywhere. That's actually part of the story. So I would argue that it probably is a better use in the second volume, simply because of the fact that it's actually integral to the story. But from the light novel medium, the light novel medium is more similar to the first one. Usually it's like a full page of picture to emphasize, you know, like to kind of show what's happening on the previous page or whatever, which is more similar to the first volume. So overall, do I recommend this series? I would recommend this series. This is a very good series. It's only 2 volumes long. It's easy to read. I read each one probably about 3 hours, which is fairly fast for me for, you know, like a 200-page book. Particularly one where I had to go to the glossary sometimes. So it's a fast read. And it's very enjoyable. It feels, you know, the drama feels real and strong. And the comedy, when one gets it, is also very strong and humorous. So I would highly recommend that you pick this up. Also, it's also a great insight into, you know, Japanese otaku, because, you know, she is very much a Japanese otaku. She is, you know, based on how Japanese otaku react to things and what they're into. And it is quite different, you know, to how Western otaku view things. So from that perspective, it's also worth it. I'd highly recommend you get it. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.